now 5:30. Would like to welcome everyone to the Public Works and Planning Commission for March the 7th. First, we'll have the roll call, please.
Yes, sir. Commissioner Cush. Present. Commissioner Piercy.
Here.
Commissioner P. Here. Commissioner James.
Here.
Commissioner Dodge.
Here.
Commissioner Boyd.
Here.
Chairman Johnson.
Here.
Thank you.
Call on Vice Chair Phil Dodd for the minutes of the last
Thank you,
meeting.
Chairman. I've reviewed the minutes. Make a motion for their approval.
We have a motion and a second to approve the minutes. All in favor? All opposed? Public comments?
No, sir.
No public comments. Okay, we're going to change the order a little bit, and we're going to move Director Tanya Bell from building codes up, then everyone else will just fall in line. So. Welcome.
My mic. Good evening. All right, I wasn't ready, so let me get ready. So I will do our permit summary for the month of April. In the month of April, Building Codes Department issued 390 permits total, and 69 of those were single-family dwellings, for a total revenue of $259,318.80. That's up just a little bit from last month and from the same month last year. Each of those were 350. All right.
Continue on.
And if nobody has any questions like that, I will move on to development tax. Development tax for the month of April, not development tax, school facilities tax, we collected $776,217.50 and $3,000 in development tax. That brings the year-to-date total to a little over $5.6 million for both development tax and school facilities tax. At this same point last year, we were at $4.4 million. All right, and if there's no questions on that, I will get into zoning enforcement. And zoning enforcement in the month of April, we had 232 inspections.
I do have a question.
Mic on.
It's a great report. It has nothing to do with your report. In the rural area.
Is your mic on?
Yep. In the rural area, subdivision-wise, is there no limit where there is no homeowners association? Is there no limit to how many or what type of animals a person can have in a subdivision like that?
That is correct. If there is no homeowners association in place to restrict that, we cannot restrict it. Now, the Department of Agricultural or PAWS can get involved depending on what type of animal it is.
PAWS referred them to you.
Is it dogs?
No.
Oh.
It's livestock, hogs, chickens, turkeys, ducks.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you've done been called.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something we could regulate if we chose to?
That would likely, I'd probably defer to Doug DeMasi, the planning director. That would likely fall into the zoning ordinance, something that falls under the zoning ordinance.
Okay. I make a motion to approve a report as presented.
Thank you.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to approve the report. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Thank you so much. Have a good evening.
So we'll move back up in the agenda. Next, we have a solid waste and convenience center report from Director Wagner. And members of the committee, I did ask her, Director, to address the question we had last month of what we're going to do as far as addressing the other convenience centers that we haven't updated, and he's just going to give us a complete update on all of them. So,
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Bishop Wagner. I'm your Solid Waste Director. We'll start off with the regular report, the Waste Collection and Recycling Report. Since the March report, Rutherford County landfills accepted 133.14 tons of brush for a revenue of $4,008. We also managed 1,137 tires for a revenue of $2,170. The total combined revenue for the month of April is $6,178. Rutherford County Solid Waste disposed of 3,437.24 tons of waste from all sources in the month of April. 2,447.14 tons came from our convenience centers, and 641.74 tons came from our schools. We recycled 348.36 tons from all sources. That's a diversion rate of 10.14% for April. That concludes that portion of my report.
Bishop, do those 3,400 plus tons, does that run pretty consistent month to month, or so, I'm assuming summer, spring cleaning, that kind of stuff, those do fluctuate, but up and down, for the most part, do they stay fairly consistent?
It's within 11% margin. The only outliers typically are the month of December and January, where we have the holiday trash that'll increase that by up to 25%.
any other questions? We have a motion and a second to approve the report. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
Thank you. Next item will be, if you'll look on your desks and your iPads, and I think I've got this set up on the big screen as well for those at home or in the back. I've had our OIT department, GIS staff generate a couple of maps, primarily, did you get a copy? Primarily so that you could kind of visualize and help the commission visualize the location of the convenience centers that are close to, and their proximity to each other and other solid waste facilities, as well as their relationship to your respective districts. So, so that we have this map here that shows the locations of them in the county and their relationship with the municipalities, and then the colorful map there will be them with your districts. So hopefully you can use this as a tool if you get a call in and somebody's gives you an address or a street location and they might be on the edge of the district, and you can send them on to the appropriate official. The primary reason for this map, and the reason I brought this map back up, is it's part of a process that I'm going through right now, which is to evaluate the location and the density of waste that moves through each of our stations, with the intent and purpose of optimizing and assessing the necessity for additional stations or enlarging of stations if possible. It's really a good place to start the process of what do our spokes look like that feed our hub. Our hub being the transfer station, which is currently under construction. The site work is under construction, and the purchasing committee selected a winner on the bid for the structural component of Boyce Ballard at $7.33 million. That's awaiting final approval and the contract signatures and all of those things to build the buildings. So that part is underway. Now we need to look at, and I think Commissioner Piercy brought it to our attention last month, that, you know, what about these other centers, and what are our plans to do with them, and then there were some questions about the funding. So we still have the funds that have been allocated for the construction of one more convenience center from the original 4 that were handed to me when I first came into this role here with the county. The 4th convenience center was originally to be located on Landfill Road. It was deemed that because of the traffic and the relationship that they have with Republic Services hauling operation, the operation that we have with hauling our trucks out of that area, and then the future of the transfer station, that could create a danger to the public to have that there. So we agreed that to reject that as an area for that. And we've attempted to find another location. We've searched in several different areas, and there have been some that were suitable in some parts. Some of them were not suitable. Some of them were county-owned. Some of them weren't. Some of them were in budget but weren't suitable. So there's not been that magic bullet of a location yet for that 4th convenience center. So I haven't given up. There's still a necessity for that convenience center and for us to have one, but getting there, we're just not there yet. The question that was brought up last month about was there money that was set aside through the budget for all of the convenience center improvements? I couldn't find any record of that in the minutes or in any of the meetings in the past about that. The only monies that I found that were allocated solid waste specific were the original $5 million that was an emergency fund that was set aside in lieu of Middle Point closure and us having to deal with our waste. We've taken a little bit out of that for the design of the transfer station development. I think we're at 4.75 thereabouts in that. And then there was I think it was around $5.6 million that was pulled out for the convenience centers, the 4 convenience centers, of which we have about $1.5 million left for a new convenience center after the construction of the 3, which is on page with about what they cost to develop each one of those centers in between. So on the last page on your iPads is this list here. And this is the second tool that I'm using, this is last year's volume per center. So it shows you the amount of trash and the amount of recycling that we pulled out on a center-by-center basis by volume. The data is a little strange when you look at it because I have a Hilliard value that's here. That Hilliard value is when we pull on the weekends when we can't take to the landfill, we stage it at the Hilliard. So there's a significant amount of tonnage that's locked into that. I'm working with a couple different models on how to distribute that. What I probably will do is prorate each value and then divide that value into the rest of them to try to make it kind of an even estimate on what that tonnage is. But if you take that out of the volume and ignore the total or subtract that 7,221.49 out of the 29,295.06, that'll give you a pretty representative number of by volume for each center. As you can see, the Laverne, the Smyrna and Laverne sites by far exceed the volumes of everyone else by more than a third in most cases, in some cases as much as 75%. So we look back, and I go back to the location map, and we see that in that area of the two municipalities of Smyrna and Laverne, I've got effectively two centers that are located within those municipalities, and then there's the one center that acts as it's this municipality map doesn't really represent the amount of homes that are over there when you look at that blue section coming out from Smyrna, but there's a lot of homes that utilize that Almaville Road from the Smyrna municipality too. So those three centers typically catch the northwestern portion of the county's waste. And then, so that's 3 centers of 14, so I've got 11 other centers that are located throughout the rest of the county that catch the waste that's generated from within some of the more rural areas, and then of course Eagleville and Rockvale. This process is underway and ongoing. I'm evaluating. I've worked with the GIS folks in OIT with doing some aerials of each of my sites. I'm looking at them and comparing, looking at how can we move containers around initially, what can we do with what we have to optimize the sites, and then I'll come with recommendations on what I think the next steps would be as far as when we have to start spending on improving sites, or if it's possible to improve sites. Yes, sir.
Has it ever crossed your mind to approach those municipalities and ask them for some help or land or to kick in, since most of that trash is coming out of their areas?
Yes, sir, it has, and I have. Laverne is. I've spoke with Mayor Cole a couple times on this issue, and we're trying to find a path toward how we can acquire and gain another one in Laverne. Smyrna, I've yet to hear any solutions from them on. Of course, they just got the new center out there on G Street, which does a real good job of managing the waste that's out there, but Smyrna continues to grow toward that Almaville area. I anticipate, my initial findings are, I anticipate that Almaville and the 231 Marshall Knob location, those two locations are going to be hit pretty hard, pretty quick with a lot of the folks that are moving in on there and maybe high on our priority list. I'm also concerned about the location in Rock Springs because there are a lot of new homes being built out there, and that center as it is very, very small.
Have you specifically asked for land?
Laverne, yes. Smyrna, no. Frankly, that's probably a question for the mayor and not I. As far as, I don't think that I have that kind of power. Wish you did sometimes.
Well, most of us are not very shy, and I don't mind asking. I know both those mayors pretty well, and I think most everybody in here does. But I think that they might at least assist us in finding property that might be suitable to do that.
Mr. Piercy.
Would it be too far away, or would it be even possibly feasible? The Walter Hill site is evidently going to be an issue to locate. Could we combine the Walter Hill and the Las Casas site together at Las Casas and improve it like we did the one in Leanna and make it functionable, or would it be too many people at one location?
That's a good question. I'm still getting data in since we've done the small arrangement that we've done now as far as traffic flow, and I know that we haven't had any reportable incidents since we moved that, which is good news. One of my concerns that I would have with throwing all of that other traffic in that center is that that is a growing area too, so there's a lot of homes that are being built in that area, and I don't want to overburden an area before it has a chance for the growth to catch up to the current size of it. But it is also one of those on my list because of the homes that are being built in that. I would say that's on my short list of the next 4 initially that I'm seeing that would need to have some long-term and serious improvements.
Would you consider asking the school if they would sell us or somehow use 2 acres? Isn't it 2 acres what you need for a site?
I think for the size of sites we're going now, between 3.5 and 5 would be optimal. You know, we can probably operate if we had one, we got a lot of schools, so if we had a small one at a lot of schools, we could go smaller, but it's really a matter of diluting the necessity. The more centers that we have, of course, the smaller the footprint each one needs to have, the increased collection burden that puts on us because there's more locations to try to get. So it's kind of a balancing act when it comes. Well, it's exactly a balancing act when it comes to that.
The school purchased several acres from the Mathis farm down on 231, just inside of the red light at Walter Hill, and they're not going to use it for a while, evidently. There's not even any conversation that I'm aware of about going ahead and building the new schools there. You might touch base with them.
I know we looked into, and I think Doug helped me. I remember here. I think we look into that property when we were trying to spot a secondary location, and there was some restrictions on it because of the way it was purchased. The school property out there in Walter Hill. There's something in the deed for it had to be used for educational purposes. But it's a good idea. We're Recycle Training Center. Education. I like the way this committee thinks.
Any other questions? Okay.
If there's nothing else, I'd like to say thank you and have a good evening.
Thank you. Now we have Planning and Engineering, Director Doug DeMasi. Welcome.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, committee members. Doug DeMasi, County Planning Director. We have our normal reports for you tonight. The first is our available lot inventory. You'll see on page, I guess that's 6 of 9, there's 2 reports in that. The first is the recorded lots. You'll see currently we have 1,044 recorded lots. Those are lots that can have building permits issued on them currently. You'll see that's up from last year at this time. We had about 955. It is actually down from last month, about 20 lots or so. We did have a couple of larger sections that were recorded, which is why you're starting to see the numbers kind of trail up a little bit. But overall, you know, activity has somewhat slowed down from this point last year, as you can see from the available lot inventory. It certainly hasn't stopped, but we do have more of an inventory right now than we have in past years. So, any questions on that report? If not, Mr. Chairman, I will go into our rezoning report. We have one case for your consideration for next week's meeting. This is by Rob Mulchin with SEC for Brandon and Daniel Mancuso. This is property is located at 1880 East Compton Road. Property is currently zoned residential medium density. They are looking for a planned development for a retreat/event venue for about 9.5 acres of property. The county zoning ordinance does require that applications for retreats that are less than 10 acres have to go through the rezoning process. Their pattern book, which is included on your iPads, does state, and you can read this, as the Compton Cave site is unique and charming, property filled with captivating natural caves, woodlands, and water features. I won't read the entire, that came directly from the pattern book. They've been using Compton Caves for photography sessions and now would like to create a venue to add what they call micro weddings and private events. I didn't really know what exactly a micro wedding was as opposed to a micro wedding, so using Google as our best friend, we did come up with a rough idea. Basically, a micro wedding is anything less than 50 or less, really, while macro weddings are much larger. Now, because of the size of their facility, as well as the needs for fire protection and whatnot, they are asking to keep it under 100. They wanted to keep it at 99. We did first meet with the applicants on this use in August of 2022. I'm not going to go through the entire staff report here. Suffice to say that there is a long zoning enforcement history with this property over the last couple of years, which I outline with this report, and there's a number of attachments on there as well that kind of show you some of the correspondence that's gone on between the county and the applicants. Just know that, again, this has been a long time in the making for this application to come forward to you. The public hearing, and I won't mince words with it, the public hearing was long. There were a lot of people who spoke. Most of those who spoke for the request were people who either knew the applicant or had some sort of a working relationship with them, with their business, and felt that the venue was positive for the community. Comments in opposition concerned the impacts to the surrounding neighborhood, such as traffic, safety, noise, drainage, impacts to the character of the area, and others. I did include the preliminary minutes from the April 8th Planning Commission meeting for your consideration. Those have not been officially approved. They're on tap to be approved next week, but I wanted you to have those just to get an idea of those who spoke and the concerns that they did have. After much discussion on this, the Planning Commission did recommend denial of this application by a vote of 9-4, 0 against, and 1 abstention. I'm more than happy to go into as much detail with this as you would like, but I just wanted to give you just a brief overview of that. As of right now, this hearing is scheduled for next week's Board of Commissioners meeting. They have the option to pull it. The last time I spoke with the applicant's representative from SEC, they said they were going to keep it on for now, and we'll see what happens. So between now and next week, they might get pulled off, it might not, I don't know. But as of right now, it is on the agenda. So again, I'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Hey, Doug. You said, what was the ratio to say no on it at the planning? How they repeat that again?
Oh, the vote you're talking about? Yeah, it was almost unanimous against for recommendation for denial. It was 9-4, 0 against, and 1 person abstained. Mm-hmm. Correct.
Mr. P.
Of course, this is in my district, and if that does come on the 16th, you can expect a lot of people here. I don't know if these guys are going to withdraw or not. They're good people, nothing wrong with them. It's just they're wanting something that's in the wrong location. They're basically surrounded by houses, and I've talked to the people that live in a circle basically around them, and during the venues that they've had, they hear them inside their house while they're, I personally don't feel like it's fair for them to have just about every weekend of the year tied up, having to worry about, are they going to mess up somebody's wedding or something like that. But I'll save those arguments in case they come up. But what I wanted to say, and Doug, you may or may not know, their property has been listed for sale.
That's correct.
Yes,
that's correct.
Thinking about pulling. I don't know whether they will or not. If they do, they do. If they don't, they don't. So we may see that one on the 16th.
Mm-hmm. Correct. No, and you're right. We've seen the listing now. It really doesn't play into whether or not they get the zoning. Or now, if they were to sell the property between now and then, they're no longer the owners. That's an issue, which I've never seen a sale go through that fast. But it's like you say, it's up to them as to whether or not they keep it on there. Despite that.
Well, even if it was approved for them, if they sold the property, would it have to be reapproved?
No, the zoning goes with the property at that point. So if it's approved, it just goes with the property, whoever the next buyer is at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Any other questions?
Yes, sir. That was my report. Thank you.
I'll make a motion to approve Doug's report.
We have a motion and a second to approve the report. All in favor? Aye. All opposed?
I have a feeling Commissioner Piercy might have some questions or want to ask me the same thing you asked Ms. Bell.
What can we do?
With the agricultural laws the way they are, it'll be difficult to do much of anything. As of right now, there's nothing in the zoning ordinance that prohibits agricultural activity, even on smaller lots. Now, there are we get people that come in sometime that'll say, well, I want to build an agricultural structure. Well, what kind of farming are you doing? Well, I'm not. Well, that's not an agricultural structure. So, there is a little bit of that, but if they're actually keeping animals on the property, there's nothing in the zoning I can do. Now, I know that there are some laws out there for urban agricultural type uses, which are probably more for municipalities. I think it's something we can look into, but I don't know with the ag laws how they are in the county, if that have much impact at all. But we'd be happy to look at that just to see.
I'm sorry, if I can add to that a little bit, cities have an enforcement that relates to farm animals and certain zonings in incorporated areas. Unincorporated areas are usually restricted from doing those kind of things. The way it's controlled is through HOAs. They have all types of restrictions against those type of things. I don't know this particular situation, but I can't think of a single solitary subdivision that the Planning Commission has approved over the last 15 years that didn't have an HOA associated to it, unless it was a small number of lots in that subdivision. And those type of things would be really hard, in my mind, to control, but the way to control it is through an HOA type of situation, and that would put it outside of our enforcement jurisdiction as a county, but inside of the HOA, which the HOA would have a lot of control and enforcement jurisdiction when it comes to those kind of things. So I'm not sure if this is an old subdivision or a small subdivision that may not have an HOA. If it is, that there's not a lot that, through my experience, Mike, that we can possibly do in that particular situation, since we are an unincorporated county. We can't control those type of things. We certainly don't want to try to control agriculture out in the county, but if there is an HOA, that neighborhood has a lot to say as it relates to what can go on in a particular subdivision.
Like I stated before, or asked Tanya, they have no HOA. These lots are like 3/4 of an acre. It's an old subdivision. It's been there roughly 25 years. But this is going to get worse because more and more people we have move here. They are trying to grow their own food, raise their own meats, and on a 3/4, half acre, 3/4 or less lot, you don't need a pig. You don't really need a cow. As time goes on, the mess gets bigger, the heat gets hotter, and then it's affecting everybody that's close to them. I didn't know if we had any regulations or not. Didn't know, can a subdivision instate an HOA if it's that old now, after the people have done moved in and everything? Can they start one on their own?
They can. They just can't force anybody. They can't force the whole subdivision to do it.
Right.
But I mean,
Right.
could they start? I ran into that situation several years ago when I worked at the city. They were trying to put up a subdivision, trying to put up a subdivision sign. They didn't have a mechanism to do that, but they created one. But they couldn't force others to actually join it. So,
Because there's several people, every other house has got 5 hens and a rooster. Because they're trying to raise their own eggs. Well, now the kick has got, they're getting a goat and a sheep, a couple of pigs, trying to raise their own meat because stuff's got so high in the grocery store. This is going to get worse as time goes on. But, hey, if we can't do it, we can't do it.
well, and like I said, we'd be happy to look into it. Now, something to keep in mind, even if we were to find some legal authority to make some kind of changes like that, And we did come up with some regulations. We wouldn't be able to do much about what's already there because there's no rules prohibiting it right now. And if you create some to prohibit it, those would already be grandfathered, non-conforming uses at that point. It would stop maybe new ones from happening, or at least regulate them. But just wanted for you to be aware of that.
And far as regulating agriculture, half to 3/4 of an acre, in my eyes, don't classify as agriculture.
But we'll be happy to take a look into that.
I would agree with that, that the concern that Commissioner Piercy has is real. And if there's a way we can, from a legal perspective, address it, that's what we need to do. So through the Planning Commission, we'll ask our county attorney to look and see if there is any way we can address that, especially going forward. Once again, we're no longer we're no longer an agricultural-based county the way we were when I was growing up. Although there are still farms out there, and we want to save as much of those farms as we possibly can. A half acre or 3/4 an acre, in my mind, doesn't classify as a farm used for agricultural business. And if there's a way we can address it legally, Doug will help you through the Planning Commission and our county's attorney to see if there's any way we can address that.
Mr. Chairman, one brief question.
Mr. Dodd.
I know old subdivisions didn't have to have HOAs. Now with retention ponds, it's mandatory. Did all subdivisions back in the day have CCRs?
It's probably kind of a hit and miss situation. It's probably a hit and miss. I would say not all of them did. But, you know, I've never really looked into it that much. My guess is that some probably did and some probably didn't.
You could, perhaps Doug's office could do a quick title search. There could be, CCR stands for Codes, Covenants, and Restrictions. Sometimes subdivisions had that as just one sheet that they would, and it may say, and still not have an HOA. Is that something you could?
I mean, yeah, you have seen that.
Off camera, if he gave you the name of the subdivision, could you look for a
Yeah, we could do some deed research. Just take just a few minutes just to see if there's anything. Yeah, be happy to do that.
Would any, and again, I don't know anything about this particular item, could any of that fall under a nuisance clause? And again, if you could reinforce it.
Right, from a private.
Or enforce it.
Yeah, I mean, that would be probably more on the private property owner side of things as opposed to the county getting involved. I mean, could it? I suppose it could. They'd want to talk with an attorney as far as what they would have to do. If it's actual, quote-unquote, agricultural uses, that might be more difficult. But, I mean, that avenue is there, but it'd be a private matter.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, tonight we don't have a highway department report, so we move on to other business. So is there any other business? Shout outs? Okay, we'll stand adjourned.